Hello friends, and welcome back to the channel, where we delve into the mind of a hero. In this entry, we'll be taking a look at Andy Dufresne from the Shawshank Redemption. While Andy does not fit the stereotypical mold of a hero, and while he does not hold any official title that would garner societal respect, Andy is seen as a hero for his ability to transmit hope to his fellow inmates and for saving the life of at least one of them. And while he did start off the film with morally questionable intentions, over the course of time, his character changes for the better as he finds redemption. The first thing we learn about Andy is that he has a troubled marriage, which culminates with his wife having an affair with another lover. While we don't know the exact details, later on in the film, Andy admits his contribution to their failed marriage, confessing that his wife used to say that he was a hard man to know, a closed book. He did love her, but he just didn't know how to show it, which drove her away. But that's not to say that his wife's actions were justified. The result of this betrayal from his wife reveals Andy's impulsive side, as he tells her, "I'll see you in hell before I see you in Reno." It's also revealed that Andy uses alcohol as a coping mechanism, a habit that he subsequently gives up in his time at Shawshank. In his trial, we hear in his account that he went to a few bars first to deal with the shock of his wife's affair, and when we see him in the flashback in his car, he is inebriated as he contemplates using his gun to threaten his wife and her lover. Despite being innocent of the crime, Andy is wrongfully charged with 2 life sentences for the murder of his wife and her lover due to an unfortunate coincidence. When he arrives at Shawshank, Andy stands out from his peers, not just because he's not actually a criminal, but from his mannerisms and the way he carries himself. Calm, mellow, and soft-spoken, in the words of Red, he strolled like a man in the park without a care of worry in the world. Andy is initially emotionally withdrawn and keeps to himself, which causes his inmates to mistakenly perceive him as snobbish and arrogant, when in actuality, his insular nature arises from his need to be cautious. One of the first things we hear Andy say in prison was to ask if anyone knew the name of the fat prisoner who was beaten to death by Hadley the night before. Unlike the rest of the inmates who objectify the man and treat him as a means to win more cigarettes, Andy sees him as a fellow human being and actually cares if anyone knew his name or would remember him. This is a far cry from the icy and remorseless description that the judge labeled Andy in his trial. Andy's empathy also relates to his generous nature, and he embodies the saying that it's better to give than to receive. He finds joy when others are enjoying themselves on account of him, as we see when he sits smiling in the shade as he watches his co-workers enjoy the beer he acquired for them. We see this also when he hears that Tommy has passed his high school certification. It brings a wry smile to his face despite being in solitary confinement. Andy is bold and undeterred, often willing to risk his own welfare for a greater good. We see this when he approaches Byron Hadley to suggest that he give his inheritance money to his wife to avoid paying taxes, although the corrupt captain almost throws him off a roof. And in one of the film's most iconic scenes, Andy decides to defiantly play an Italian opera recording for the inspiration of the entire prison, although he would certainly know that such an act would warrant severe punishment. But ultimately, what makes Andy's character admirable is his ability to inspire hope, not only in himself, but in others. A life sentence in prison is no easy thing to accept, and can easily lead one down the path of despair and hopelessness. Andy's ability to retain hope comes from his sense of purpose. He always has a goal in mind, be it carving chess pieces for his board or building a library. And even after that, his purpose shifts to helping his fellow inmates with their high school certification. In hindsight, at the end of the film, we learn that his overarching goal was to escape from Shawshank. The rock hammer that he conceals in his Bible represents his perseverance and patience towards a goal that would take decades to accomplish, given the limitations of his tool. Andy's persistence is also demonstrated by him writing to the state senate for 6 years for his library funds without so much as a reply. It is unclear how long Andy had had his means of escape ready. The film does not give any indication of time from when he is released from solitary to his escape, but from Red's narration, it would seem that Andy only decided to escape shortly after Tommy's murder. If that is true, it speaks to the fact that Andy had a strong sense of purpose in coaching and nurturing Tommy, one that he wouldn't want to leave prematurely by escaping first. Part of the film's tension comes from Andy and Red's disagreement on the importance of hope. In Red's point of view, hope is a dangerous thing. Hope can drive a man insane. When Andy tells him of his dream to run a hotel on the beaches of Mexico, Red advises him to give up, calling it a pipe dream. After telling his friends that during the solitary confinement he imagined music in his mind to keep his sanity, Andy tells Red that here in prison is where hope makes the most sense. In Andy's eyes, hope was what he relied on to get him through the tough times, and to him, it's the one thing the prison can't take away from him. When he does eventually escape, we immediately see him tearing off his prison clothes, symbolic of him shedding his prison identity as he rejoices in his newfound freedom. Unlike Brooks and Red, who became institutionalized and uncomfortable with the notion of reintegrating into society, Andy relishes his freedom. While Andy was also a person of importance in prison, just like Brooks and Red, he never let it become part of his self-worth. It's worthwhile to note that while Andy was innocent before coming to prison, he confesses that he did become a criminal in his time at Shawshank. While his part in the warden's scams was forced, he admits that he is just as indictable as the warden for laundering all that money in his attempt to reassure him should he ever get out. But in Andy's perspective, he feels that he has made recompense for his part in the fraud when he mentions to Red the numerous inmates he's helped with their high school diploma, and also for the decades in prison for a crime he didn't commit. In his emotional-laden conversation with Red, after spending 2 months in solitary confinement, he tells Red, "Whatever mistakes I've made, I've paid for them, and then some." When Red is finally granted parole and released from prison, he suffers the same identity crisis as Brooks, ending up in the same apartment as him and working the same menial job as a grocery bagger. Eventually, Red contemplates suicide, but is saved by the hope of living with Andy in Mexico. Red owes his life to Andy, as if it were not for him, Red would have ended up just like Brooks did, without a sense of purpose in the world and suicidal. Andy's words finally hit home, reminding him that hope is a good thing, maybe the best of things, and no good thing ever dies. Altruistic, resilient, and inspirational, Andy Dufresne was a hero to his fellow inmates, repeatedly putting their needs above his and serving as an inspiration of hope for them. While it's not known if he was a God-fearing man, his actions were certainly more honorable than the hypocritical warden, who was a religious cloud without water. At the end, Andy Dufresne is a reminder that hope prevails even in the darkest of times. So what do you think of Andy Dufresne, folks? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and if you like this video, subscribe to see more entries like these, and you can check out some of the other characters we've covered here.